To divide polynomials, we need to recall long division. So here I've got a long division problem. We're going to divide 874 by 14. So if you remember back from grade school, we are setting the problem up like this. And next, we look at how many times 14 goes into 87 how many times evenly does it go in. So it goes in 6 times, because 14 times 6 is 84. Now we subtract 84 from 87. That leaves us with 3, and we bring down the 4. Now how many times evenly does 14 go into 34? Well, it goes twice. 28 is the largest number that's a multiple of 4 and less than 34. So we subtract that and we end up with 6. Now 14 doesn't go into 6 since 6 is smaller than 14. So what we do is we take up here, we write 6 over 14 as our remainder. Now 6 over 14 can be simplified to 3 over 7, so you can have 62 and 3/7 as your answer. Now if we take this and we start dividing polynomials, we're going to set it up the same way. We've got x to the third minus 5x squared plus 4x minus 2 inside the division, and x minus 2 on the outside. Now rather than taking x minus 2 as one whole number, we can just take the x and work with the x first. How many times, well, what do I need to multiply x by to get x to the third? Well, I need to multiply x by x squared. If I multiply by x squared, x times x squared is x to the third. We take this x squared and we also multiply it by the negative 2, which leaves us with negative 2x squared. We then subtract that from the original polynomial, like in the previous slide where we subtracted 84 from 87, here we're subtracting x cubed minus 2x squared from x cubed minus 5x squared. The x cubed are supposed to disappear. Negative 5x squared minus negative 2x squared is plus 2x squared because we're subtracting a negative. So we get negative 3x squared. Bring down the 4x, and we start again. What do I need to multiply x by to get negative 3x squared? Well, I need to multiply by negative 3x. So negative 3x times x is negative 3x squared. Negative 2 times negative 3x is positive 6x. And again, we subtract. The negative 3x squareds disappear. 4x minus 6x is negative 2x. And we bring down the negative 2. And we go again. X and negative 2x. I need to multiply x by negative 2. That gives me negative 2x. And negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. Again, subtract. Negative 2x's can't disappear. And the negative 2 minus 4, negative 6. Into negative 6, I can't multiply x by anything to get to negative 6. So I've got minus 6 over x minus 2. And that becomes your final answer. X squared minus 3x minus 2 minus 6 over x minus 2. Now, here we're going to do the same thing. However, we want to make sure that we have spaces for all the x's in descending order. Meaning, I need an x cubed space. If my polynomial is x cubed, I need an x cubed space, x squared space, x space, and a constant space. Here I have no x squared in my polynomial, but I need to make a place for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a placeholder. I'm going to start with my x cubed. There's no x squareds here, so I'm going to add 0 x squareds. It's just a placeholder. Somewhere in the problem, an x squared could show up, and I need somewhere to be able to put it. Plus 7x minus 3. What do I need to multiply x by to get x cubed? Well, I multiply it by x squared. So we get x cubed, and 4 times x squared is 4x squared. This is why we need the placeholder, because I wouldn't have had anywhere to put the 4x squared otherwise. Subtract, we get negative 4x squared plus 7x. x times what gets negative 4x squared? Well, it's negative 4x. We get negative 4x squared. And 4 times negative 4x is negative 16x. And we subtract. So here now we're going to end up with 23x minus 3. X times what gets me 23x? Well, it's positive 23. If I do that, I get 23x. And then 4 times 23, so plus 92. Subtract negative 3 minus 92, negative 95. X times, there's no way I can get to negative 95. So, minus 95 over x plus 4. There's your final answer. Everything up there. Finally, we're going to look at multiplying by a trinomial. It's set up exactly the same way. So, we are going to need a placeholder in the numerator. We have x to the fourth, x to the third, x squared. We have no x, so we need to put one in there. So we get 3x squared plus x minus 2 times, divided by, or divided from even, 3x to the fourth minus 2x to the third minus 9x squared plus 0x plus 4. And then we just go through that whole process. So we get x squared times 3x squared gives me 3x to the fourth. X times x squared is x cubed. Negative 2 times x squared is negative 2x squared. And we subtract. So when we subtract, at 3x to the fourth becomes 0. Negative 2x cubed minus another x cubed is negative 3x cubed. Negative 9 plus 2, negative 7x squared. And I'm going to bring down the 0x. 3x squared times what gives me negative 3x cubed? Well, it's negative x. That gives me negative 3x cubed minus x squared plus 2x. And again, we just subtract. So we get negative 7 plus 1, so negative 6x squared minus 2x, and bring down the 4, plus 4. 3 times negative 2, 3x squared times negative 2 would give me negative 6x squared, so I'm negative 2. Negative 6x squared. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. If we subtract here, we end up with 0, 0, and 0. So there's no remainder for this. So when I divide these two polynomials, I get an answer of x squared minus x minus 2.